Hi again then guys, and welcome to another specific car review on Gran Turismo Sport, and this time we're touching on a car which, for pretty much the first time on this channel, I actually featured in a top 10 countdown before reviewing it individually, and that car is the newer shape Honda NSX. This is a car which, as I touched on in that countdown, was a vehicle that I was looking forward to. Put simply, it's a car that we had a concept version of on GT6. It was very good in some ways, not so good in others, but mainly it was just a showcase of what the car was going to be like. And back then, of course, I said that I predicted that this NSX would be one of the hero cars of the next Gran Turismo game, especially in terms of its performance being something akin to the C7 Corvette Stingray and how good that car was on Gran Turismo 6. Now that hasn't exactly panned out, partially due to the fact that we don't have that kind of tuning and those levels of performance from most cars, at least, on GT Sport. However, this NSX is a very good car, and of course it featured in the 10 best vehicles of the game so far as I'm concerned, so that indicates how highly I think of it. Now, in terms of what this car offers, it falls quite nicely between the precision and the raw ability of a GTR, but with the passion and the charisma of, say, a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. And that is pretty much always what the NSX has done, so that's nothing new for the brand. What is new, though, is how it goes about that, because the NSX in its first iteration, be it with the pop-up lamps or the facelifted version, from the standard model all the way up to the Type R, they always had a purity to them. They were very focused, back-to-basics kind of cars, which, almost in a very McLaren F1 kind of way, took the approach of being more advanced from a mechanical point of view rather than having computers doing all of the work for you. That was always more the Nissan GTR's angle and the Skyline. They went very heavy on the tech side of things to really support the driver. And both ways of doing it are very effective, as you can see from how good those cars are. With the NSX, the tech tended to be in the development of the car rather than in the driving. Now, it's a little bit closer to the GTR in that way. You've got a hybrid system, all-wheel drive, which of course the NSX never used to have. You've got this much more digital, I would say, alternative to what the analog feel of the original NSX was. But in the case of an NSX, especially with today's day and age and the kind of rivals which this car has, not just its direct rival, which is of course the GTR, and potentially the new Supra, we'll have to see what that one's like when it comes out, but also in a more general sense, in as much as it's an exotic. So you've got stuff like the P1, the LaFerrari, the Porsche 918 to go up against as well. And those cars are very tech heavy, hybrid systems are being much more accepted and more widely used in the world of exotic cars, so you've got to keep up with the times, and that is what Honda will do. And that is, of course, what they've done with this NSX. Now, the engine is a 3.5 litre plus hybrid system, of course. It's not categorised, if I remember correctly, as an all-wheel drive car in the game. I believe they refer to it as an MR vehicle, a mid-engine rear-wheel drive car, but we all know it's all-wheel drive, really, at least partially. Now, the horsepower per tonne suffers a little bit on this model because of the fact that it is reasonably heavy. It weighs 1,780 kilos. Which is quite a bit. In fact, that's about as close to a GTR as an NSX has ever been in terms of weight. The NSX was always up there with the RX-7 in terms of how light it was in that top-tier JDM class. Now, however, these aren't JDM cars anymore, they're just full-on exotics. So although it pays tribute to the lineage of the NSX, it doesn't necessarily have to stick to that. And in the case of this car, I think it's benefited because of it. And having, as I mentioned earlier, that middle ground between Japanese efficiency and Italian passion really benefits the NSX. Because if you put it up against the main rivals that it's had, the big four, if you will, in terms of JDM cars, you've got the Skyline, the Supra, the RX-7 and the NSX. Those are pretty much the four kings of the category, and then a little bit behind you've got the Impreza and the Evo, which are really totally different vehicles. This one was always the most exotic of the four, because the Skyline is a modified sedan or a modified coupe, The RX-7 is a pure sports car, as is the Supra, whereas the NSX is not just a sports car, it was a Porsche or Ferrari 360 Modena level sports car, an exotic vehicle in price, in packaging, and in ability. It just didn't sell that well. Now there's much more of a market for this kind of NSX, and I do easily believe that it's going to sell far better than the original did, because now it can finally live up to the true potential of its price, because that's the issue with developing a car which is that good. You have to charge so much to make money back for it, which is kind of the Lexus LFA problem, where they lost money on it because of how much it cost to develop, or the Bugatti Veyron also did a similar thing. In the case of this NSX though, it's definitely worth it, because this is a fantastic performance car. The power is 570, it's got 406 pound-feet of torque, and even though the weight is quite high, it is definitely one of those cars, like the hypercars that use hybrid systems, that don't feel like they have that extra bit of weight at all, because it's such a well-engineered vehicle. It's light on its feet. As you can see from the video, it's very tail-happy. In fact, with the tuning that I'm using, I would say that the NSX is now a little bit too playful. It sometimes doesn't want to get in line. At the same time though, it's by far the easiest car to drift that I've driven in the game so far. The Lamborghini Huracan is probably second to this for me personally, especially if you're limiting it just to all-wheel drive cars, and the price tag is only 200,000 credits on this vehicle, which of course is a lot more than the GTR, which is under 100 grand, but at the same time the NSX always was more expensive. On Gran Turismo 6 even, the NSX Type R premium model was like a 120 grand car, so that's not too surprising at all. Plus, although it is more expensive than a GTR, it's a lot cheaper than a Ferrari or a Lamborghini Huracan, so it's actually pretty well placed given that it's much more of a pure exotic than the GTR is. The GTR is an exotic car, but at the same time it doesn't really feel like that same kind of vehicle, a pure mid-engine exotic. It's still of course a front-engine car, it has definite roots in the Skyline lineage, although it isn't one anymore, whereas the NSX, right from the get-go, was that mid-engine pure sports car, as we mentioned earlier, and it still is. It benefits from keeping that lineage close in mind, but accepting the advantages of modern tech and putting that together with it. But that's it overall for this particular pick. It's certainly a car that's worth checking out, a very impressive performance machine, and certainly one which was well worth waiting for. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.